At the holiday table, my dad raised his wine glass in a toast. To the one who can't seem to get their life together. Laughter rippled around the table. My sister chimed in. At least he makes us feel financially better about ourselves. I raised my glass, smiling. To the one who just sold the vacation home you've been living in, rent-free. The clinking of glasses stopped instantly. That family vacation home they all loved so much? The one my sister had been treating like her personal palace for 3 years? I bought it. I paid for it. I maintained it. I covered every single bill, utilities, repairs, property taxes, insurance, all of it. My sister had moved in gradually at first. A weekend here, a week there. Then suddenly she was using the address on everything from bank statements to party invitations. She hosted her friends there, bragged about her place to anyone who'd listen, and even started talking about renovating her kitchen. Meanwhile, I got to sit at family dinners and be the butt of jokes about not having my life together. The irony was suffocating. For years, I'd played along because it seemed easier. Let them think I was struggling. Let her believe she was winning. I'd helped her out of financial trouble twice, wired money into her account when she swore she'd lose everything, and never asked for so much as a thank you. But something had been building inside me over the past year. I'd been quietly pulling away, thinking, planning, preparing for the day when I wouldn't just sit there and take their abuse. That night at dinner was the day. The next morning brought something I hadn't experienced in years, blessed silence. No group text from my sister about what a wonderful evening we'd had. No forced family photo posted to social media with captions about cherishing traditions. Just quiet. I made my coffee and went about my morning routine, feeling lighter than I had in months. The silence was almost refreshing. I didn't need to hear them scrambling to make sense of what had happened or, worse, pretending it hadn't happened at all. By afternoon, though, the peace cracked. My phone started lighting up, first my sister, then my father, then my mother. All going straight to voicemail. They weren't calling to check on me. They were calling because they needed answers, needed to see if they could somehow talk me out of what I'd done. What they didn't know yet was that there was nothing left to talk me out of. The vacation home had been listed quietly, shown discreetly, and sold weeks ago. The deposit was sitting in my bank account. I told no one because I didn't want the drama until it was too late for them to stop me. At 6 o'clock that evening, the knock came. Sharp and patient. I opened the door to find my sister standing there, looking nothing like her usual polished self. No perfect hair, no makeup, wearing an oversized sweatshirt that looked like she'd thrown it on in a panic. She pushed past me into my apartment without waiting for an invitation. "You can't just sell it," she said, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "Tell me you're joking. Tell me there's still time to call it off. Do you have any idea what this means for me?" The words tumbled out fast, almost tripping over each other. I let her go on without interrupting, watching her unravel in real time. When she finally ran out of steam, I told her everything. How the sale was complete. How I had been covering her living expenses for years without acknowledgement. How the house was never hers and never would be again. "I did it all quietly," I said, my voice calm and even. "Never expected gratitude. But I also never signed up to be ridiculed at my own family's dinner table year after year." The color drained from her face. She sank onto my couch like someone had cut her strings, trying to force a laugh that came out hollow and desperate. "You're overreacting," she said, but the words fell flat. She knew this wasn't impulsive. This was planned, deliberate, and irreversible. The thought of losing the house wasn't just about losing a place to live. It was about losing the entire image she'd built around herself, the story she told everyone about her successful life. Without that address, without that backdrop, she'd have to start explaining things she'd never had to explain before. When she finally left, she didn't slam the door or throw any parting shots. She just walked out with her head down, moving quickly like she didn't want anyone to see her. I knew exactly where she was going. Straight to our parents. They didn't wait long. 2 days later, that heavy, deliberate knock came, the kind that says, "We're here to settle something." Both my parents stood on my doorstep, my father's jaw tight, my mother clutching her purse like an anchor. I let them in without a word. Dad took the armchair, Mom perched on the edge of the couch like she might need to jump up at any moment. No small talk, no pleasantries. "Your sister's in shock," my father said, his voice clipped with that tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable. "And frankly, so are we. This thing with the house, it's drastic. It's not drastic, I replied. It's overdue. I reminded them that the vacation home was mine. Bought with my money, maintained with my money, every single bill paid by me. When my mother tried to interrupt with something about how the house had become part of the family, I cut her off. When's the last time either of you paid for a repair? A single month of utilities? Silence. My father shifted uncomfortably, his foot tapping against my rug. He started in about families sticking together, about helping each other out. I'd heard it all before. Family doesn't mean being the permanent safety net while getting mocked for supposedly not having your life together, I said. Family doesn't mean silently footing the bill for years so someone else can play house, only to be humiliated at your own dinner table. My mother's voice softened. Maybe things had been misunderstood, she said. Maybe they hadn't shown enough appreciation. She used that word, maybe, like it could smooth over years of taking me for granted. There's no maybe about it, I told her. You took me for granted. Not once, but as a way of operating. They didn't deny it. That surprised me. They just sat there like the truth had finally caught up to them and there was nowhere left to run. When they got up to leave, my father headed straight for the door. My mother lingered for a moment, looking at me like she was seeing a stranger, someone different from the son she thought she could always count on without question. She didn't ask me to undo the sale. She didn't try to guilt me. She just nodded faintly and followed my father out. By the third day, I realized my sister had gone into full damage control mode. She wasn't calling me, she was calling everyone else. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly reached out. Some just checking in. Others clearly fishing for my side of the story. They all had the same careful tone, like they were afraid of stepping on a landmine. It didn't take long to figure out her version of events. In her telling, I'd blindsided her by selling the family home, the same one she'd helped make what it was, right out from under her. She painted herself as practically homeless, the victim of my cold, impulsive decision. She conveniently left out every important detail, that the house was mine, bought and paid for by me, maintained entirely with my money, and that she'd been living there rent-free for years while using it to boost her image. At first, I let it slide. I figured anyone who mattered would see through her story. But then things got weird. My realtor called to say my sister had shown up unannounced at one of his other property showings. She'd cornered him in front of potential buyers, demanding to know who had purchased the vacation home and hinting about legal action. It was absurd. She had no legal standing, but it showed me she was willing to drag strangers into her drama. That night, I got an unexpected visitor. One of her closest friends, someone I'd only met twice, stood at my door asking if she could hear my side of the story. What she told me made my stomach turn. She'd been staying at the vacation home on and off for months, and my sister had told her she owned it completely. No mention of me at all. This friend wasn't there to defend my sister. She was angry, embarrassed that she'd been part of a lie without knowing it. When she left, she said something that stuck with me. She's going to burn herself down if she keeps pushing this. By the weekend, cracks were already showing in my sister's story. A cousin called to tell me they'd overheard her on the phone, yelling about people switching sides. Apparently, that friend had confronted her, and instead of backtracking, my sister doubled down. She claimed I was lying to make her look bad, that I was jealous of her life. Then came the move I didn't see coming. The buyer of the vacation home, someone I'd never even met face to face, reached out through my realtor with disturbing news. My sister had somehow tracked down his information, walked into his office without an appointment, and demanded he undo the sale because it was a family matter. According to him, she'd gotten loud enough that security had to escort her out. He wasn't angry with me, he was understanding about the situation. But he made it clear that if she approached him again, he'd file a harassment report. That's when it hit me. She was unraveling faster than I'd thought possible. And people were starting to notice, not just friends and family, but strangers, professionals. She was crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. I decided not to intervene. Sometimes the best way to win is to let someone dig their own hole. I expected her to drag this out for weeks. She thrived on keeping drama alive long past its expiration date. But she overplayed her hand so quickly it caught even me off guard. My cousin sent me a message. "You need to see what your sister just posted." Attached was a screenshot from a community bulletin board in the town where the vacation home was located. My sister had written a full-length rant accusing the buyer of stealing her property. She claimed she'd been tricked out of her rightful inheritance by a family member with no loyalty. She didn't use my name, but everyone knew who she meant. But she'd gone further than I thought possible. She'd included photos of herself around the property, lounging on the porch, posing with friends in the kitchen, sitting on the dock. She framed them as proof of ownership, which would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. Worst of all, she'd included the buyer's full name, the house address, and even his business information. The fallout was immediate. The buyer called that afternoon, calm but clearly irritated. "I've had clients calling me all day asking what's going on. She's making me look like a criminal." After a pause, "If she keeps this up, I'm going to have my lawyer file for a restraining order. And if I have to sue for damages, I'll need you to testify." I told him I'd stand by him completely. For the first time in this whole ordeal, I decided to pull my parents directly into the fire. I called them and explained everything: the post, the photos, the buyer's name being broadcast to strangers, the potential legal action. I expected pushback, maybe even excuses. Instead, there was just silence. Finally, my father said, "We'll talk to her," in a tone that didn't sound confident at all. That night, my mother called me back. Her voice had none of its usual edge. They'd confronted my sister, she said, and it had gone exactly as I expected. She'd blown up, accused them of siding with me, and stormed out. Then my mother said something I'd never heard from her before. "I think you were right. This was never just about the house." The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from my sister. No screaming, no accusations, just a flat, tired voice saying, "I need to talk to you. Alone." She didn't say why, but I knew she'd felt the shift. She'd realized that every move she made could now be used against her, not just by me, but by someone outside the family with real legal power. For the first time in years, she wasn't in control. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. No impatient knock this time, no commanding presence. She just stood there, waiting. I let her in without a word. We sat at my kitchen table, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind that fills the space when both people know the power has shifted completely. When she finally spoke, the words came slowly. She didn't apologize outright, but she admitted she'd let things get out of hand. The post about the buyer was written in anger, she claimed. She'd deleted it. She never meant to cause him trouble. She was embarrassed, stressed. All explanations that weren't quite admissions. All excuses that didn't change the facts. When she finished, I laid out what would happen moving forward. No more unspoken financial favors. No more borrowing that was really taking. No more living in anything I owned. If she wanted something, she'd pay for it herself. If she tried to drag me into public drama again, I'd cut contact entirely. No second chances, no negotiations. She didn't argue. She didn't try to soften me with jokes or turn it back on me like usual. She just nodded once, her eyes fixed on the table like she couldn't bear to look at me while agreeing. When she left, I thought, "That's it. It's done." But a week later, I learned that wasn't the full story. The buyer called unexpectedly. I braced myself for another problem, but instead he thanked me for keeping the situation from spiraling further. Then he mentioned something I didn't expect. My sister had contacted him directly again. Not to harass him this time, but to ask if he'd consider selling the property to her once she got the funds together. She'd offered to pay full market value. The irony was perfect. She didn't have anywhere near the money she'd need. She'd have to find investors, take out loans, or, and this part almost made me laugh, ask our parents for help. I could imagine those conversations already, the mental gymnastics she'd used to frame herself as the rightful owner, fighting to get back what was hers. That's when I realized she hadn't learned the lesson I thought she had. She wasn't moving forward. She was still looking backward, still trying to rewrite history, still convinced that if she pushed hard enough, she could undo what I'd done. But for the first time, that wasn't my problem to solve. She could fight, beg, or scheme all she wanted. I wouldn't be part of it. I'd stepped out of the role they'd kept me in for years, and I wasn't stepping back in. The real ending wasn't her losing the house. It was me walking away from the part I'd played in enabling her for so long. In the silence that followed, I realized something unexpected. It wasn't anger or bitterness I felt, it was relief. 2 weeks of quiet. No texts, no calls, no snide group messages from my sister, no family updates from my mother, no veiled requests for favors. At first, it felt strange, like the calm before another storm. But as the days passed, I started to think maybe this really was the end. Then on a gray Thursday morning, my phone rang. The buyer's name on the screen made my stomach tighten. I figured it was something minor, maybe a question about forwarding mail or maintenance details. His first words shattered any calm I'd built up. "I think you'll want to hear about this." The night before, my sister had been spotted back in the town where the house was located. She hadn't called, hadn't knocked, hadn't asked permission. She'd gone straight onto the property. The house was mostly empty. He was still moving in, but that didn't stop her. She tried the back door first, fumbling with something in her hand. When it wouldn't open, she walked the perimeter, peering through windows, testing the shed handle. Neighbors recognized her instantly. Most had known me as the owner for years. When they saw someone circling the property after dark, they didn't hesitate. One called the police, explaining she was the previous owner's relative but shouldn't be there. Another neighbor's security camera caught the whole thing on video. By the time police arrived, she was gone. But her car had been seen leaving the street, and the footage was clear enough that there was no question it was her. The buyer wasn't pressing criminal charges yet, but he'd filed a formal trespass notice with local authorities. And here was the detail I hadn't seen coming. The police had called my parents to verify her contact information. That meant the story couldn't be spun. No way to frame it as a misunderstanding or just checking on the house. The police had her on video. The neighbors had made the call. The timeline was exact. That night, my father called. He didn't sound angry or defensive, just tired. "She's done, son. This isn't something we can cover for." No speech about family unity. No suggestion to work it out. No attempt to make me shoulder any blame. It was the first time he'd acknowledged her behavior without trying to protect her from the consequences. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Just 3 words. "You ruined me." I read it twice, then set the phone down without answering. Because I hadn't ruined her. She'd done that herself, step by step, decision by decision, convinced she could twist every situation to her advantage. All I'd done was stop playing the part she'd written for me. That was the final break. No more obligations. No more being the quiet one who absorbed the hits. No more letting their version of family dictate my place. When the silence returned, it wasn't heavy anymore. It was light, like space I could finally use for my own life. For the first time in years, I wasn't enduring anything. I was free from it. It's been a month since the trespassing incident, and things have settled in a way I never imagined. My parents haven't tried to mediate or drag me into another family meeting. My father, true to his word, stopped covering for her. My mother has been quieter than I've ever known her to be. They still speak to her, but from what I hear, it's strained. She's been couch surfing between friends' places, trying to convince someone to back her plan to get the house back. No one's biting. The buyer did take the next step. Last week, he filed a formal restraining order against her. I wasn't required to testify. The police report, neighbor statements, and security footage were enough. The court date came and went without much fuss. She didn't even show up. The order went through in her absence, which says everything about where she's at now. Here's the part one didn't expect. The buyer called afterward, not to talk about her, but to thank me. He said something I haven't been able to shake. "It's rare someone cuts ties with this kind of drama before it destroys them. Most people don't know when to stop paying for someone else's chaos." It was strange hearing it from someone who barely knew me, but it landed in a way my own family's words never had. As for my sister, the last I heard was through a mutual friend. She's telling people she's starting fresh in another city. I don't know if that's true or just another version of her story. I don't care enough to find out. What I do know is this: I didn't just sell a house. I sold the last piece of ground she could stand on while looking down at me. I closed the door on years of being the safety net, the backup plan, the silent provider who was somehow still the family joke. Now my life is quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like waiting for the next blow. I've got my weekends back, my head clear, and my money going toward things that actually matter to me.